History shows, Elliot, well, first of all, history shows that no country stayed on top forever, 100, 200 years at the max, and then they peak and go into decline. So I presume we're no different from anybody else. But one of the problems with history is people don't learn the lessons of history. We had a president recently who didn't know history, or if he did know history, he said he was smarter than history. I know I'm not smarter than history, and history is very clear. No nation and no currency, by the way, because they sometimes go hand in hand, has stayed on top forever. So America is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We have troops in over 100 countries. There are people who would say that we're overextended financially, economically, militarily, and it looks like they might be right. So yes, no, I worry. It's not a good time to be young in America, because what the young people are going to inherit is mind-boggling. I've got 2 teenage kids, and it disturbs me. It's good to be old because I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay for all of this. I get the benefits. They're borrowing a lot of money, spending a lot of money. Pretty well. I'm old. Okay, do it. It helps me, but it doesn't help the future. 100 years ago, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number 2. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. Literally, the IMF had to fly into Heathrow to bail them out. So it can happen. It has happened. It often happens. And the symptoms, the money printing, the debt, et cetera, have always led to the kind of problems you're talking about. I don't think it'll happen in 2001 or 2021 or even 2022, but it's on the way. If you buy just about any country in the middle of a war, it goes straight up. Even if you bought Japan, if you were careful, you still came out making a lot of money, or Germany, even though both countries were destroyed. One of the things I have learned is if you buy in a catastrophe, you often make a lot of money. So I'm not advocating that we have a war so that we can all buy in wartime or anything. But your point is good. Yes, Britain was great. But the people who stayed in Britain didn't have a great life. Their standard of living compared to what it was before, it was not the same country. It's not the same world. It was amazing. I mean, I was actually a student in England in some of those years, and there were exchange controls. I can remember 20 years after the war, there were still sites in London that were known as bomb sites where the Germans had dropped bombs. 20 years later, they still hadn't cleaned them up. They didn't have any money, So the standard of living was not great. You couldn't take money out of the country. I mean, it was a mess. But that had been the richest country in the world. Never a big correction. Oh, hallelujah, Elliot. Well, I've never seen that in history where things never go down. That would be fantastic. It certainly never happened in my investment career. I had plenty of mistakes and plenty of things go down. But your point is basically, yes, my experience and my observation is that all of this money printing it has to go somewhere. It takes a long time to build a bridge or a factory, but it's very easy to go online and you buy as much of anything as you want. And that's what's happening. Everybody has a lot of money in their pocket. There is a lot of money around, and it's going into financial assets. Will that last forever? It never has, but you say maybe it will. Maybe it will this time.
Well, I don't think it will. I'm just looking at the Venezuelan stock market, and it's just straight up in their local currency.
Well, for history shows that it's very clear. There have certainly been periods when stock markets in various countries have done extremely well, but it didn't make people rich. What really counts is making people a lot of money in an international currency so that you can go and buy a watch or a car or a loaf of bread or whatever it is you want to buy. I happen to be of a different view. First of all, the U.S. stock market has gone up, 10, 12 years without a serious problem, other than some short, gigantic disruptions, but nothing serious. That's never happened in American history. And maybe, Elliot, maybe it is different this time. Janet Yellen says, don't worry, we have solved the problems. We won't have problems, economic problems again. She's got degrees from 2 Ivy League universities, so maybe she knows what she's talking about. I happen to know she's wrong. We will have problems again, and when they come, it's going to be horrible. 2008, we had a problem because of too much debt. Elliot, since 2008, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed by gigantic amounts. So it would be my view that the next time we have a problem, it's going to be the worst in my lifetime, given that the debt is so, that may sound like some kind of wild statement, but look out the window. The debt is there. The debt goes higher every day. I know what it caused in 2008. It's got to be worse next time around. But Mrs. Yellen says, no, don't worry. It's not going to happen again. And Mr. Powell says the same thing. Hyperinflation, eventually, of course, we may have hyperinflation. Britain ended with not hyper like Venezuela, but very serious. And the value of the currency went down 80% against the US dollar over a few decades. That's pretty serious stuff if you happen to be a British citizen. I doubt that we will end in hyperinflation quickly. That's usually towards the very, very end of a decline, of a long decline. Venezuela had been declining for a long time. Zimbabwe was in decline. Zimbabwe at one time was the richest country in the British Empire. Been a long way down since then. Mr. Mugabe learned how to ruin the country, and he did. It took him decades, but he totally ruined it, and it ended in wild inflation. I don't think we're going to have it that quickly in the U.S., even if we're going the way of Britain. Don't panic yet. But it doesn't mean we can't have serious inflation and a decline of the standard of living and a decline of the value of the currency, and we probably will. History is pretty clear. That's what happens. So the question is, that kind of default I cannot see that happening in the U.S. However, the value of the money is certainly going to continue to decline. As I said, the British pound went down 80% against the value of the US dollar, which replaced it as the world's reserve currency. I'm sure that the value of the US dollar is going to continue to decline. Everybody watching this knows that the dollar is not what it used to be. It depends on whether you're buying bread or gasoline or anything. It's not the same, and it continues to decline. And they're not on your side, Elliot. I told you, they want to keep their jobs.